Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 140. I am your host, Dan Matson, aka Wooden Boat Dan. If you can't do it, nobody can. And this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, tradition, and romance of wooden vessels around the world. Thanks for joining me today, folks. We've got a really special episode in store today. Our special guest today for the featured episode is me, myself, and I. That's right, I just got back from the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival 3 days ago. Had an absolute blast, way more fun than you should be able to have in 3 or 4 days. And so I'm going to be talking about that here shortly. In fact, let's jump right in and get going because I got plenty to talk about. So I arrived in Port Townsend last Thursday, and festival officially, I guess technically it starts Thursday evening with a Lifetime Achievement Awards ceremony, but for most people it starts Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I arrived on Thursday, stayed till Sunday night. During those days, I did 7 interviews for the podcast. I took about 350 pictures. I taught my class, which is titled, Building Your First Wooden Boat, a Primer. It's based upon my world's best-selling ebook that I wrote last year. I also attended one class. Well, I guess I kind of went to 2 presentations. There are more presentations than classes. Went to a presentation on nautical photography and then another one on the race to Alaska. I also got to do the Sunday sail by, which is where almost all the boats that are there go out in the harbor and sail around. And so there's probably 150, 200 boats. I got to go out in a 19-foot Crotch Island Pinky owned by Kirk, which was really fun. Spent about an hour and a half out there sailing around all these vessels. It was just amazing. So I got to do the sail by. I got to hang out with my friends Christina and Corey from Florida, who, as a result of hearing about the podcast 2 years ago, moved to Port Townsend a year ago. And Corey's just finishing up a year at the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building in Port Hadlock. I took my dory to the festival and sold it. And I spent $0 during my 4 days there, which was a personal record. So anyway, the festival was amazing as usual. The weather was absolutely fabulous. It was sunny every day and between 70 and 75 degrees for a high. So I'll give you kind of a blow-by-blow here of my activities and some of the fun stuff I did. So I arrived on Thursday, and my plan was to try to make this as economical a trip as possible. In fact, I kind of had in the back of my mind a personal challenge, that once I arrived in Port Townsend, not to spend any money in Port Townsend. So I had to pay for the ferry to get there, and my plan was I was going to sleep in the back of my truck and in a parking lot there, kind of a grassy field that I have a parking pass to since I'm a presenter. And I took food in a cooler so I'd have some food to eat. So I just kind of thought in the back of my mind, I'm going to try to. In past years, I've done it pretty inexpensively. Probably only spent maybe less than $100 for 4 days. But I just thought, man, I wonder if I can spend $0. So when I arrived there Thursday and dropped off my boat, parked my boat out on Point Hudson, put my for sale signs up, got that all set up. went back to, I texted Corey and Christina to let them know I was in town and said, let's hook up. And so I kind of went about my business, talked to some people and stuff. Pretty soon I get a text from Corey saying, hey, do you want a free room tonight with a little bit of view of the harbor? And I'm like, okay, is it a trick question? Anyway, Christina works for a lady in town who has a big house, and some of the rooms have views, and she rents out rooms on Airbnb. So Christina arranged with her for me to be able to stay in one of the rooms for free the entire time I was there, which was really cool. I didn't have to get set up in the back of my truck, even though I was perfectly fine doing that. In fact, I was thinking about pitching my little tent there and staying in that. But anyway, it turned out I had a room with a bed, had a nice bathroom with a shower, and so I spent my nights there. Wasn't there a whole lot during the day, but so I got a free place to stay, and that was pretty cool. So I did 7 interviews. First one, well, these aren't necessarily in order, but I interviewed John Harris from CLC Boats. This is the 3rd consecutive year I've interviewed him during the festival. We had a great conversation talking about some of the new designs at CLC Boats and some of the new technology and how their business is going and things like that. John's a really bright guy, obviously, so it's really fun just chatting with him sitting on the beach. And these will all be up podcasts that'll be coming up, by the way. Then I had emailed Lin Pardey a couple of weeks before the festival and said, hey, do you want to hook up? I'd love to interview you guys again. It's been 2 years since I sat down and interviewed him at the festival in 2012. So Lin said sure. So on Friday morning at 9 o'clock, I hooked up with Lin and Larry, and they were actually staying. They've got a truck, like a 3/4 ton truck with a camper on the back of it. And so we actually went out to their camper and sat in the camper and did an interview for, 45 minutes. But, it was really cool. I mean, one of the amazing things about doing this podcast is that I get to sit down with people like Lin and Larry Pardey and ask questions and have a conversation. So even if you weren't listening out there, folks, I'd probably keep doing this just because it gives me access to people and I get to have these awesome conversations. I mean, how many people at the festival got to sit down with them uninterrupted for 45 minutes and talk? I mean, pretty amazing. So I had a great time with them. Really fun. They really enjoy it. And I had given Lin a list of about 10 different questions and said, here's some ideas I have about questions I could ask you to talk about. So she had picked 5 or 6 of those, and so we went over some of those questions. So that was really fun. Then I got to hook up with Colin Angus again, who I just published a podcast with him, episode 139, and I kind of did a biography of him. He's an adventurer that read a book when he was a kid and decided to go to other parts of the world and sail and do different things. And he's National Geographic Adventurer of the Year in 2007. Done some really fun stuff, so I got to hook up with him, which was really cool. Colin is an awesome guy. He lives in Victoria, is married, and has a couple young kids now. And then one day I was at the festival early, and I would get there early in the morning, like around 7, before it officially opened, and take pictures because the sun would be coming up and the bright light on the boats makes some really great pictures. So I'm taking pictures and I see this guy working his way up to the top of his mast. So I got some amazing pictures of him at the top of his mast, which is probably 35, 40 feet tall, with the Northwest Maritime Center in the background and some other boats around it. It's a pretty cool photograph. So later in the day, I went down to the boat because I hadn't met this person. Went down to the boat he was on. His wife was there. I met her, Beth Harris, and showed her the pictures that I had taken. And it turns out her husband's name is Cody. And so she started telling me that they'd built their own boat and all this cool stuff. So I said, well, let's do an interview tonight for the podcast. So I hooked up with them. It was really fun. They built their own boat. Took them 2 years. They just launched it. They're a young couple from Wyoming and Bainbridge Island, Washington, and they lived in Utah. So I got to hook up with them. And then I got to interview Jay Benford, who's a designer from the East Coast, although he lived in the Pacific Northwest for quite a while. Cool thing about that is Jay is a fellow believer like myself, so we had that in common. That was pretty neat. So I got to sit down with Jay and his wife Donna at the place they were renting and do an interview and talk about his designs and his boats and some of the fun stuff he's done. And then on Friday, I saw Jake Beattie, the director of the Northwest Maritime Center. I said, hey, Jake, what would you think if we did a podcast about the Race to Alaska, which is this event that's coming up next year, June 4th, for the first time. There's going to be a race from Port Townsend, Washington to Ketchikan, Alaska, 750 miles. The rules are basically any boat with no motor is allowed to participate, any number of crew. You can't switch out the crew. You've got 3 checkpoints or waypoints along the way that you have to hit. And the winner wins $10,000. Second place is a set of steak knives. Seriously, that's the way Jake advertises. So I got to sit down with Jake and talk about the Race for Alaska, which is creating a lot of buzz because there's a lot of debate about what boat's going to be the fastest. Turns out in June that winds are unpredictable and all that stuff, so could be a sailboat, could be a rowboat, probably be a combination boat. So that was pretty fun. And then I got to sit down and interview Tony Grove and Toby Elliott. And Tony is working on restoring Canada's oldest functioning sailboat. Her name is Dorothy. She was built in 1897 in, I don't know, I forget if it was Vancouver or Victoria, one of those two places. And he's restoring her piece by piece, and Toby is doing a documentary about it. And I had talked to them last year by email, and we just never got to hook up. So I got to sit down and do an interview with them, which was really fun. This is really a cool sloop that's got a real pedigree behind it. Tony shared about some of the stuff he's finding as he goes through the boat and fixes her up. So that was really fun. So those are the 7 interviews I did. I kind of wished I'd done more like 10, but people get really busy at the festival, especially Saturday and Sunday get really packed up, so it's kind of hard to schedule them. But I was really happy. I had 7 really great interviews, probably average, 40 minutes per interview, something like that. Then on Friday at noon, I taught my class, Building Your First Wooden Boat, a primer. Place was basically packed out, had about 32 or 35 people there. So I've taught this class 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th time. And I tweaked it a little bit, but kind of used the same format as I did before and had a slide presentation. It was really a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing it. I got a great response from the people. And even got some applause when it was all over. And everybody in the class signed up for signed up for my monthly newsletter so they could get the free boat building resource guide that I was giving out. So that was really fun. So maybe next year I'll do 2 classes again, do one Friday and one Saturday. Last year I did one both days, and the second one's actually easier than the first because you're kind of in a groove and you've got your live practice in, and the second one you can kind of breeze through it. So I got to meet a couple people that have been listening to the podcast. Tony Bates. Tony, for listening. It was great sitting down with you and talking shop. Tony is from Portland. Had been listening to the podcast for a while. And then I got to hook up with Kelvin. Can't remember Kelvin's last name, but Kelvin has built a kayak and some other boats, and he's been listening to the podcast, and he drives a Datsun 510 that's got the original paint, pretty amazing, and a 73 GMC RV that's got like airbags for suspension and all this for raising and lowering to level out your rig and all this stuff. So Kelvin and I had a great time. And then I got to hang with Corey and Christina, which was really fun. We had some meals together, sat around a boat one evening and had some spaghetti and talk shop with some of the folks that were there, probably 10 people on a beautiful ketch, about a 43-foot ketch, so that was pretty sweet. So I had taken my dory to the festival to sell. And as I was driving into the festival Thursday, I didn't know it, but a gentleman named Jeff saw my boat and thought, wow, I'd love to have a boat like that. And he's kind of been thinking about buying a small boat. Well, he didn't. Anyway, he goes to the festival the next day, and he sees my boat, the same boat that he saw driving in, and he sees that it's for sale. So he's pretty excited, so he calls me, and so I go and show him the boat, and we start the motor and everything. And I was asking $3,600 for the boat, and he offered me $3,000 cash, and that was on Friday. So I'm like, nah, I don't think so, Jeff. I'm just not going to sell it for $3,000. I just got here to the festival, blah, 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 sort of thing. So Jeff kind of looked at it a little bit more. He says, okay, I'm going to take off. Good chatting with you. I'll keep you posted. So he took off. So then the next day I get a call from him. He's like, hey, man, I sold my, he had an inflatable he had to sell. So he sold his inflatable, and he's like, I want to buy your boat, and I'll give you $3,500 cash. So I'm like, okay, that works. So that was on Saturday. No, that was on Friday still. Yeah, that was on Friday, because originally he'd looked at my boat on Thursday, I think. So that was on Friday. I don't know which day it was, to be honest. It might have been Saturday. I guess it was Saturday. So Saturday, he comes over, pays for the boat. I load him up with everything. I take a video of him driving away, which I posted on Facebook. Shed a few tears, sort of, not really, and said goodbye to my dory. So that was really awesome. So then that night I get a call from Jeff, and he's like, I can't get the motor started. It's got a 15-horse Merc two-stroke that pretty much looks like brand new. I had it tuned up this summer, $275, had everything gone through and had it serviced. So I said, well, I'll come over, Jeff, and I see if I can get it started. So I came over a little bit later, went over there, couldn't get it started, couldn't even get it to fire. And I'm just thinking, oh, brother. So Jeff was cool about it. That was Saturday night. So I said, Jeff, let me see if I can, I'll make sure that the motor runs for you, even if I have to pay to have you take it to somebody. I'll make sure it's right. So, but what I'm going to try to do is see if I can find a mechanic. I said I know quite a few people in Port Townsend, and try to bring somebody over here Sunday morning to look at it, because Jeff wanted to take the boat out on Sunday during the festival sail-by. So I left Jeff's place. He just lives right in Port Townsend. Went back to the festival, was hanging out with Corey and Christina on this boat with about 10 people. And so I told them what was going on, and I said, anybody here be able to help me in the morning, go over there, look at this thing, and try to get it started. So Corey's like, well, yeah, I'll go. And Corey has a friend there from Florida, Taylor. And Taylor's like, yeah, I'll go. Well, it turns out, Corey's really good at mechanical stuff. He's learned a lot not building his own boat, but he bought a boat, and he's had some engine problems, so he's working on that. Taylor is a helicopter mechanic, so he's obviously very good at mechanics. So Sunday morning, we go over to Jeff's place about 9 o'clock. And long story short, turns out that the fuel line was pinched. When I had put the fuel line back on the boat between the tank and the motor, I had the fuel line too far forward, so that when you pivoted the engine to the starboard of the boat to start it, it would pinch the fuel line. So that whole time we're trying to start it, the fuel was pinched off. It's not getting any fuel. So as soon as we fixed that, it fired right up. Everything worked great. Jeff was happy. So that was cool. So that was a big relief, because I'm thinking, oh, brother. Anyway, so that was Sunday morning. So went back to the festival and did the sail-by, and that was really cool. And I ended up spending zero. I didn't spend any money in Port Townsend. I ate food that I had. I also bummed some food. Actually, the Maritime Center provided some kind of snacks and drinks for presenters. They had a little room set aside. You could go in there and get some stuff. And so I had a little bit there, and then I would go back to my truck, have breakfast at my truck. I'd have some grape nuts and make some coffee. And think it was Thursday night, the first night. No, it was, I don't know. I think it was Thursday night. Thursday night, the Seahawks are playing. And I'm walking from the festival back to my truck, which was like 2 blocks, and walking through a little campground where there's some RVs, and I see the Seahawks game is on a big screen TV sitting outside an RV, and there's about 10, 15 people there watching it. So I'm kind of watching the game from a distance, and this guy's sitting there, he goes, "Hey, come on over, watch the game with us." Then he's like, we got hot dogs and hamburgers here and some potato salad, help yourself. So, and then I look at this guy and I go, I think this guy looks familiar. And I said, "Hi, I'm Dan, what's your name?" "Oh, I'm Kiwi." I was like, "Well, I know you, Kiwi. I've met you before. He's the owner of Edensaw Woods in Port Townsend. He graduated from the boat school the very first year it was open in 1984. So I sat down with Kiwi, had a hamburger, watched part of the Seahawks game. So that was pretty sweet. So, yeah, so I left the festival not spending any money, which is pretty cool. So some of the cool boats that were there this year, there was a folding canal boat. And this is being built by Brad Rice, who's on Whidbey Island. He's called the Boatwright. And Brad designed this boat for a guy that's going to take it and use it in the canals of Europe. And so it's this long, skinny thing, and the back third of the boat pivots forward up and over the top of the boat. And the bow of the boat, which is in 2 pieces, this long, skinny bow, pivots horizontally and folds up against the sides of the hull, and you end up with this box that will fit inside a container. It's pretty ingenious, really. Anyway, the basic shell is built and prime painted, and Brad had the boat there. It's pretty amazing. My friend Jay Smith from Anacortes, who's a Nordic boat building guy, he had a fairing there, which is a boat that can be rowed or sailed. I believe it has two rowing stations. And he builds them like they built them 700 years ago or whatever. This was built out of Alaska yellow cedar with white oak frames, using crooks in wood for the frames, so there wasn't any steam bending required. The bottom was hollowed out, so he started with a very thick plank, like 3 inches, and hollowed it out, so it had kind of a concave hull. And it was fastened with copper rivets and trunnels, which are wooden pegs. So this is an amazing boat. Lady Washington was there, which is a square-rigged tall ship that's a replica of a boat built in the 1700s. Amazing boat. Adventurous was there, 133-foot gaff-rigged topsail schooner, built in 1913, designed by B.B. Cronshield. Zodiac was there, which I believe she's 150 or 160 feet length overall schooner from Bellingham. There was a row cruiser there that Marty Loken built, which is the first kind of prototype of a kit that's going to be going for sale. It's basically I think it's a 19-foot boat. It's got a sliding seat station in it at one end, and the other end is a small cabin that you can actually sleep in. There's no sitting headroom or anything, so it's a very efficient rowboat. So the idea is you'd put 2 people on that. One would row while the other one would sit in the cabin and either sleep or rest or just watch or whatever. Pretty cool boat. Virginia 5 was there, which is a Mosquito Fleet boat from Puget Sound. She's a steamship. She's a big, tall, double-ended boat. Pretty amazing. And then Pacific Swift was there, and she is, she's got to be a schooner. I know she's a schooner. hang on just a second. Let me look up the details. Okay, so Pacific Swift is owned by Salts, which is a sail training organization Canada. She's 111 feet length overall, built in 1986, 20-foot, 10-inch beam. She was built as a working exhibit for the Expo 86 in Vancouver, BC, and she sailed over 100,000 deep sea miles. She's been to Australia, Europe, and remote communities on Easter and Pitcairn Islands, other far-flung ports of call. She provides sail training programs along the coast of British Columbia. Beautiful boat. Her sister ship, Pacific Grace, was there a couple years ago. So she was amazing. Obviously, there's a ton of boats that I haven't mentioned because I believe there's 170 boats there or more. And there was probably 5 or 6 scamps there. So there were just so many boats to see. It's just one of those things it's like drinking from a fire hose. I'd really hoped to get on Alcyone with Sugar and Leslie Flanagan, and I didn't get a chance to do that. But there's just a ton of really cool boats there. So if you haven't been to the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival, you have to go. It's really, really a blast. There's just a lot of cool things going on. I wasn't able to do some things just because I was busy doing podcasts or selling my boat. They had a ceremony celebrating the return of the original bell for the schooner Adventurous. And she was located, I believe it was earlier this year or late last year. They found her bell. It was down in California, the original bell that was on the ship. A gentleman wasn't sure what he had, but did a little research and found out it belonged to Adventurous. So Sunday night, I packed up my stuff. The festival closed at 5, got on the ferry at 6:45 without my boat, and came home. You know what? Pulling up to my house without 2 boats outside was a pretty good feeling, to be honest. Not having my dory and my scamp there. So now I've just got the scamp. And here's the cool thing is the Amazon business I started 3 or 4 months ago. Which, by the way, if you're interested in seeing my store, you can go to amazon.com/shops/Uncle Dan's Market, no apostrophe, and you can see what I've got for sale. Anyway, I moved my Amazon business. I did have it in the garage temporarily, so now I moved it to a bonus room over the garage. So now I can actually officially be working the next few days on getting the garage set up as my wood shop so I can get cranking on the scamp. Because here's what I'm thinking, folks. The race to Alaska is looking pretty good the first day. Not the whole thing, but they're doing this special thing where the very first day, for $50, you can sail from Port Townsend from Port Townsend to Victoria. And there's lots of boats that are going to do just that first day, and there's going to be support boats and things like that. So what a great opportunity to sail across the Strait of Juan de Fuca and have support and do with a bunch of other boats from the area. So I'm thinking, man, if I can get this scamp done and get her out and get some sea trials in, I might do that. That kind of appeals to me. Of course, if I sailed her up there, I'd have to get her back, but I think there'd be people coming back that I could hang with too. So exciting stuff. So the other thing I want to mention here is I've got like 12 interviews now on my computer that I've recorded that I have not published yet. And I've been doing my podcast bi-weekly for the last maybe 6 months, 6 or 7 months, something like that. But I'm going to go back to a weekly format for now because I've got such great material to publish and it's all recorded. So I'm just going to start cranking these out every Thursday. I'm really, really looking forward to that, and I hope you enjoy it too. If you're interested in buying my ebook, you can go to my home page and you can see information there and click on it and buy the PDF version for $5 or the Kindle version for $6. If you'd like to connect with me, you can do so by sending me an email, woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Please note that's my new email address. I'm no longer using dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. Got too much spam at that address. And you can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube if you look for Wooden Boat Dan. If you'd like to subscribe to my weekly newsletter, you can do so by going to hookedonwoodenboats.com/subscribe. And if you'd like to buy a Hooked on Wooden Boats t-shirt or ball cap or something like that with the logo, you can go to hookedonwoodenboats.com/store. Also, if you do make purchases from Amazon, I would politely ask you to go to my link first and then make your purchase. And if you do that, I get paid a small commission. It doesn't cost you any more for your purchase. And that link is hookedonwoodenboats.com/Amazon. Also, if you would like to make a contribution to the podcast, the cost helping me with the cost of doing the podcast, which is, $1,500 a year or so, there is a tip button on the home page. Okay, well, thanks for listening today. It's been fun yakking about the Port Townsend Wooden Boat Festival. It's an absolute blast, folks. You've got to get there next year. They've already announced the dates. It's always the weekend after Labor Day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, I'm thinking next year it's like the 11th through the 13th. But anyway, if you look it up on Google or you just look at your calendar for the weekend after Labor Day, mark it down now. It's going to be an absolute blast again, I am sure. So thanks for listening today. Have a great week. Wooden Boat Dan over and out. Keep the bright side up and the barnacled side down. God bless.